Shalom. It's the 23rd of June and I started with the book of Hebrews on the weekend, and this morning I basically started with chapter 1. So I had to do a lot of reading regarding the book of Hebrews just to understand a few things. Now, just to remind you, for those who've listened to the teaching of James, when we study a book in the Brit Hadashah, it's important to understand who the book was written for, who was the author, what was the situation, what were the main issues that were addressed, and is that applicable to us living today as well. So when we looked at James, we saw that in the terminology is addressed to Israel, so it's a greater audience. It includes the Gentiles who come into faith, and it's also about the timeless message between the two comings of Messiah, which is applicable to those living in the end time as well. Now the book of Hebrews is slightly different. It's written for Jewish people who come from a Jewish background, who came from Judaism, who accepted Yeshua as the Messiah. And specifically, looking at the time frame, the tenses used in this book regarding the sacrificial system is written in the present tense. That means that the temple was still active. They still did the daily sacrifices and all the temple services while this book was written, and that means that the time frame of this book was between the ascension of Yeshua and 70 AD. So that's more or less when this book was written, probably closer to 70 AD towards the end, as historical writings refer to. Now, regarding the author, some believe it's Paul, some believe it's Luke. There's different opinions about it. If you look at the style, it doesn't really fit Paul or fits Paul's writing style, so it might be someone else, but it's definitely one of the epistles that was written to address issues within a congregation. Now, the congregation, as I said, most probably was situated around Jerusalem, where the temple was, and the main issues they faced was going back into Judaism, renouncing the Messiah. Now, with that in the back of my mind, and from interactions with people who go to Israel on a yearly basis, there's currently an active group in Israel, or multiple rabbis, who mix in with Hebraic roots Christians or with Messianics, and they intrigue them with the symbolism and the language, and they pull them in, and their main agenda is to sway them towards Judaism, for them to renounce Yeshua as the Messiah, and they're very successful as well. So even today, the message that's written to the Hebrews back then applies to us today because of this current situation that exists within Israel. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the theme of this book. Why is it written to the audience called the Hebrews? They did not exist basically as Hebrews. Back then they were either called Jews or they were called Gentiles or Romans, whatever nationality you came from, but predominantly Jews. And referring to the temple service and the sacrificial system and all of that, you know that it is Jewish people practicing Judaism, or whichever sect of Judaism. You had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and all those in between. And there are many sects of Judaism, of which the Pharisaical one is basically similar to the Orthodox Jews today. The Sadducees back then is similar to the Karaites today. They don't believe in all the writings of the Talmud and the Zohar and all those volumes and volumes of commentaries. They only believe in the Torah, and they take it literally. And that's basically what the Sadducees did. They copied the scrolls, and they only adhere to what the message is in the Torah. So anything in between is basically also might be part of that congregation that this letter was written to. So the theme Hebrews, the theme of this book, this topic of this book, written to the audience called Hebrews, has got a hidden message inside, just because of the fact that, or my assumption, which I think is fact, that they were predominantly Jewish believers that followed Messiah. He referred to them as Hebrews to point them back to the origin. Now, if you went through the Torah cycle on year by year basis, you'll notice that in Genesis, when Yahweh called Abraham, he was called a Hebrew, and that's in the time frame where Lot was captured. And they went to Abraham, and he lived in a tent in the land of the Amorites called Mamre, and he was called a Hebrew. Now, the word Hebrew means to cross over, one from regions beyond, and it's also linked to regions beyond. So where's this region beyond? Beyond what? That's basically a region beyond the physical. So it is Yahweh reaching out from the region beyond to a man called Abraham. And that's basically where the faith started. It started with Abraham. And the idea of this faith is to return the people back unto Yahweh. And that we see from the word Memre. It is Mem Resh Yod. And Memre, if not Yod, it's Aleph, Mem Resh Aleph. Now, if you take the word Mem Resh, it's Mamar. That means bitterness, and that word bitterness is found in Proverbs that talks about the bitterness of the father for his son. So Yahweh created humanity, Adam, and Adam sinned and fell back, and that caused a bitterness in Yahweh, which is represented by the Aleph. And Yahweh wanted to do something about this bitterness inside of himself because of the sin of humanity, the sin of man. And he started the process of restoration with Abraham, that is called a Hebrew. So being identified as a Hebrew, identify with the process of restoration, which is all about the work of Mashiach. And the work of Mashiach actually started with our father Abraham. And that is the premise of this book, speaking to the people who identify with Mashiach, identify with Father Abraham, and to remind them where the origin of their faith is, and it's not in religion called Judaism. So I'll continue this at a later stage. I hope you have a lovely day. Speak to you soon. Shalom.